Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, President Bongbong Marcos ordered sending a note verbale to China over a recent incident near Pag-asa Island. Following recent meetings of President Marcos with U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping, how is the Philippine independent foreign policy shaping up? And later we get to know the reforms or changes in the DFA under the leadership of a seasoned diplomat. Live and exclusive, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo joins us in the program. President Bongbong Marcos says the country will be sending a note verbale to China following an alleged confrontation between the Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippine Navy near Pag-asa Island. On Monday, the Armed Forces of the Philippines says that the Chinese Coast Guard forcefully took an unidentified floating object in the area, which was vehemently denied by China. Also following the visit of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Marcos's meetings with U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping, what kind of direction is the Philippines pursuing in dealing with the two superpowers? Let's go straight to the source of the story. First, an exclusive, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo. Secretary Manalo, good to see you. And I know it's been a couple of months, but congratulations.
Well, good morning, Kiki, and thank you very much for having me here this morning, and certainly a great pleasure for me.
Let me just start with how it's been for you being the DFA secretary.
Well, as you know, there are quite a number of challenges as well as opportunities, and certainly getting into work and trying to address them all has certainly been something which has been also very taxing in a way, but of course, it's something that I know we have to do.
Any surprises when you assumed the post?
No, not really, because I think the advantage I had was I knew what surprises I would get.
Yeah, it's not as if you were coming in really from the cold. Okay, but I still want to talk about this, the direction you plan to take in the Department of Foreign Affairs. Aside from what I'll be asking you, independent foreign policy, note verbals, diplomatic protests, where do you plan to take the DFA under your leadership? Steer it towards what would be your priorities?
Well, my priorities, of course, will be determined by the priorities of the country and the existing pillars of our foreign policy, and so that would consist of, for example, addressing the economic issues such as promoting food and energy security, education, infrastructure development. At the same time, upholding our main concerns such as the rule of law, international law, protection of migrant rights, and addressing global challenges, particularly climate change. So these are all within the purview of the department, and my intention is that we should, to the extent possible, address them as effectively as we can.
That's a lot to talk about. In fact, you've had some bilateral meetings with foreign ministers of other countries as well, wherein you talked about food and energy security and a lot more topics. But I'm going to start with the rule of law. President Bongbong Marcos asked the DFA to send a note verbale to China on the recent Pag-asa incident. Has the DFA acted on this, sir?
Yes, in fact, even before that, we were studying the incident and also have been in and are continuing to be in close coordination with the other Philippine government agencies who are also looking into this. And the department has also taken action. We have issued a note verbale already seeking clarification from China on the incident. We, of course, have our own reports, but we would like to hear it from the side of China. And at the same time, we will continue monitoring this incident and we'll see what further diplomatic action might be needed.
So a note verbal has already been sent?
Yes, yes.
Here's the thing, Secretary, that needs, I know this needs further clarification. as you mentioned, you're seeking clarification from this note verbal that was already sent. Let's just go back to the news report. So the AFP's Westcom said the Philippine Navy saw something floating. They retrieved it in the waters of Pag-asa, and they said this was forcibly taken from them. Westcom Vice Admiral Carlos again says it was actually the members of the Naval Station Emilio Liwanag who tied the object to their boat, and as they were towing it back to bring it to the station, the Chinese Coast Guard blocked their course twice. Those were the words, twice. And soon after the Chinese Coast Guard launched a boat and cut the towing line and took the object. And then basically they said, well, no one was hurt in the incident. It wasn't really a life or death situation, so they just let it be. But I'm just going to add, China denies this, saying there was actually a friendly consultation between the two parties. How does one actually understand the situation or even reconcile two sides that are saying two different things?
Well, that's our intent in sending the note verbal. Of course, we stand by the statement of the Vice Admiral, that we are taking that to heart, and that's why we have referred it, in effect, in the note verbal to China, and we'd like to see how they reply. Now, depending on how the reply comes out, then we will have to see what to do. But definitely, in order to begin the process, we would like to get an official comment from China, especially in response to our note verbal.
Yeah. So the statement, I believe, of the Chinese embassy saying there was a friendly consultation. In fact, there's something else that they said, that how they answered this was they even thanked the Philippine Navy for finding the object, and then they said that this was a friendly consultation. This is not official yet as far as the DFA is concerned. What will make it official is a response to the note verbal.
Yes, we would take the response in writing as the official response.
Secretary Manalo, what happens if they insist it was a friendly consultation? Because that's already the initial statement made by China. Paano po yun? I know you said you stand by the Vice Admiral, well and good, but if they insist it's a friendly consultation, how does one prove one is telling the truth and the other was not?
Well, we'll have to take it step by step. But if depending on the reply, if we find the reply may be lacking or we need further clarification, we will continue the discussion, perhaps through notes verbal or, if necessary, through verbal face-to-face meetings.
Okay, so that's possible, a verbal face-to-face meeting. But the note verbal, to be clear, is not tantamount right now to a diplomatic protest. It's still a note verbal. It's not a diplomatic protest.
Well, technically, it is a diplomatic note, and we've made it very clear that this is what the reports we have received, and we'd like to see clarification from China. And I think they can take it whatever way they want, but we would hope that they respond to us as soon as possible.
Okay, so moving forward from this topic, sir, there were also two blasts that were heard 2 hours after this incident, I believe, also Sunday, that the residents in Pag-asa felt jolting even on the ground. Has there been a note verbal also issued, or you're going to issue a diplomatic protest here? Because there are reports that they were coming from artillery guns from Zamora Reef.
Well, our note verbal has really been based on the official report we received from the Philippine Navy. And this was already sent to us and has appeared there, and that is the subject of our note. Of course, other issues or other incidents that related to that which arose could also be considered depending on the reply we received from China.
Okay, so just to be clear, sir, did the note verbal include the 2 blasts already, or you're still looking into reports on these supposedly 2 blasts that were heard?
We're working step by step. We're trying first to seek China's clarification of the report we received from the Philippine Navy, if any.
Okay, we will be taking a very short break. We're going to talk about the meeting of President Marcos with Chinese President Xi Jinping and the visit of Vice President Kamala Harris. When we return, we will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo. Sir, just a quick question before we move to the meeting. When was the note verbal sent, sir?
Oh, yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay, thank you for that. So let's move on to the meeting with first, sir, Chinese President Xi Jinping. A number of issues were talked about, and I did also read that the Department of Foreign Affairs was actually saying that there are already talks to continue with the Code of Conduct. Please update us on this.
Well, thank you. First, the President Marcos and President Xi Jinping met at the sidelines of the APEC meeting. This was their first face-to-face meeting. And during that meeting, they discussed a wide range of areas for cooperation. Perhaps I'll get to that a bit later. But on the question of the issue of the Code of Conduct was also discussed, and actually discussions or negotiations on a Code of Conduct for the South China Sea have been ongoing for a number of years already, 4 years now, and it's really been negotiations between the ASEAN, all the ASEAN member states, plus China. And both leaders reaffirmed their commitment to try and accomplish or conclude negotiations for an effective and substantive code of conduct as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But negotiations are at the moment still ongoing.
Okay, so would you have any idea on when the actual discussion would continue? I understand, of course, as you mentioned, sir, even during the time Secretary Teddy Boy, we've actually been talking about this code of conduct. But in terms of resuming the talks, any idea when this could happen?
They will most likely continue again next year. In fact, the talks, the negotiations actually, not just talks, are actually taking place on a regular schedule. The problem is, of course, when COVID came, there was a 2-year gap in the negotiations because, of course, there were no in-person meetings. But they are now continuing. I expect next year we will have at least maybe at least 2 or perhaps even 3 more rounds of negotiations on the code.
What are the stumbling blocks, Secretary? What are the challenges?
It's quite technical, and many of our legal and technical experts on the sea, on the law of the sea, for example, are involved in the negotiations. Many technical aspects on exactly what activities would be taken to prevent any unforeseen events or incidents, as well as the processes or procedures which would have to be adopted, and definitions, etc. It's quite a technical exercise because it would really be a code. What's important, though, in our point of view, is that it should be substantive and effective, because we already have a declaration of principles on the South China Sea. That was adopted over 20 years ago. We would like the code to build on that. So I think technical issues are a stumbling block, not a stumbling block, but they're also a challenge in the negotiations.
And if you were to possibly give us an estimate or a guess or a promise or a commitment, sir, do you think this code of conduct will finally come to fruition in the next, 1, 2, or 3 years?
Well, of course, I don't have a crystal ball. My hope is that, sana in 1 or 2 years. But just another issue is that, of course, this involves negotiations amongst 11 countries, in effect. And that would require agreement of the 11 to have a code. So all I can say is that we will do our best to conclude it at the earliest possible time in a way that suits or addresses the concerns and interests of the Philippines.
So the meeting between the president, the two presidents, the Philippines and China. Tell us more about that. Let's set aside now the code of conduct and the commitments or the promises made during that meeting that you can share with us.
Sure. I think they were very much on the same page, at least in terms of the enhancing our economic and development cooperation. As you know, the president's priorities, as stated in his State of the Nation, were on agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and of course, pandemic response. And this exactly is also on the same page with China, which wishes to increase cooperation on agriculture, trade, infrastructure, energy, and pandemic response, so as people to people. So both leaders had a good exchange on how we could increase our economic cooperation. They also referred to the South China Sea issue, and while they said it remains an issue, they said it would not define the total relationship between the Philippines and China, and that we need to see how we can manage our differences. I think also what was interesting is the two leaders had a broad exchange on regional issues as well as global issues such as climate change. So I think in effect, this was, given the fact that this was a meeting on the sidelines, was really quite substantive and extensive. And I hope, we expect that in the forthcoming state visit of the president to China, we will be able to go into more depth in some of these particular issues.
In fact, Secretary, that's a lot of topics really that was covered, and these are really initial talks between the two presidents. So if I were to ask you again, were there any solid commitments made during that meeting? Has there been any?
As it was at a very general level, but I would say that on a strategic level, there was really a desire to see how we can improve and enhance our relationship. And I think the details, any specific agreements, and there are a number being considered, could hopefully be finalized during the expected state visit early next year.
And that happens from January 3 to January 6. President Bongbong Marcos will be going to China. Just a last topic on this. Any talks on joint exploration in the South China Sea that was discussed during the meeting of President Marcos and President Xi Jinping?
Yes, both leaders expressed their desire to continue discussions and negotiations or restart discussions and negotiations on oil and gas issues in the Philippines. That would include, of course, issues like development, etc. But it was at a very general level.
Right. Still, a lot of the issues discussed still on a general level, and possibly more definitive or solid deals or commitments will be made during the president's visit from January 3 to January 6. Now, Secretary, let's also talk about the brief. It was a brief meeting, right, between the president and U.S. President Joe Biden. Let's start with that before I go to the visit of the U.S. Vice President. Please tell us more about that, because I just saw a very brief chat between the two leaders.
Yes, Pinky, actually that was a meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, and I would say it was a little bit more than chat. I thought it was fairly substantive, given the time limits, and both leaders expressed their commitment to enhancing the Philippine-U.S. relationship in all of its aspects. That's economic, security, defense. And also they discussed similarly economic issues. Again, priority issues to the Philippines, such as agriculture, food security, climate change, clean energy, and promoting public-private partnerships. So I think it was also a fairly broad exchange. Also. And it was clear the Philippines and the U.S. are really committed to enhancing our relationship.
All right. Now let's go to the visit, the recent visit, concluded visit of Vice President Kamala Harris. What can we expect from the visit after meeting with the president, meeting with the vice president, and her trip to Palawan, sir?
Yes, I think the visit of the vice president, which was of course welcome, basically reinforced and reaffirmed the issues that were discussed between the president and President Biden in New York, and it was very important to us in the sense that it indicated the real commitment of the United States to working with the Philippines on issues like climate change, clean energy, and promoting, ensuring food security, as well as additional points such as job creation and upskilling. Also, there was again a reaffirmation of the need to deal with the impact of COVID-19 in all its aspects. And I think there will be cooperation there. They also briefly discussed our economic and defense and security relations, and also some issues such as the on energy and regional issues.
What was the possible addition of 5 more EDCA posts discussed, Secretary, apart from the 5 existing ones?
No, not that I'm aware of. Not during her call of the president.
And President Marcos, is he going to the United States also for a state visit next year?
Well, there's nothing firm yet. A lot also depends on the scheduling and also the schedule of the president of the United States. And so we're still working on this possibility. It's still in the works, but we at this stage we're still in the process of trying to find when might be the most conducive date for both presidents.
Right. So for now, the next visit will be in China. There have been talks also with the DFA secretary, with your counterparts in other countries. Let's talk about that, but we need to take a very short break. The Source will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo. Secretary, I saw some tweets, and there could also be another interesting meeting that was between you and the French foreign minister, also discussing, I believe, energy and food security. Please share with us your talks with the French foreign minister.
Yes, we met on the sidelines of APEC, which is really the only opportunity to meet. And we really had a good conversation. Those were maybe just 2 of the issues that we discussed, but France is very open to let's say, having energy security cooperation, especially in renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
We touched on that, on clean and green energy. And I think France is also very interested in that. They're actually a leader in energy, in the provision of energy in Europe. And so they were quite interested in that, as well as food security. Also, France is taking also an interest in the regional issues here. And I think we found some commonalities there. And so we think that France is a very important partner for us as we move into the years ahead.
When you said regional issues, what exactly did you talk about, sir?
Broad range, ranging from, of course, the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, to the North Korea, which, as you might recall, during the APEC meeting, two missiles were launched by North Korea. We talked about the Taiwan issue and in China, the tensions on Taiwan, and of course some other, and of course economic issues, how we might be able to, how Asia, the role of Asia and the ASEAN in let's say, serving as engines of growth, not only for the region, for the world, and of course climate change, which is also a security issue, which we discussed.
Right. Could you also share with us other meetings you had during the sidelines of the APEC summit?
Well, during the APEC, of course, we were, of course, with the president. So whatever free time I had, I managed to meet. But essentially, in APEC, I perhaps had I think I can recall only 1 meeting with the French foreign minister. The rest, we were with the leaders. But I had other meetings with foreign ministers during the ASEAN
How about
summit.
that? Yeah.
And Yes, and especially in New York too, during the General Assembly, where I met a number of my counterparts, and I think all of them were very positive. And the important thing here is we all agreed to meet again. Either I invited them to visit the Philippines, and some of them invited me to visit their countries to continue in more depth the exchanges we had.
But were there any commitments for a visit, sir, from your invitation?
I think there's a commitment to enhance cooperation with the Philippines in many areas. And the interesting thing was when I said to them the priorities as enunciated by the president, for example, agriculture, infrastructure, energy, most of them were very interested to see how we can do more in that area in terms of collaboration between governments and our private sectors.
And also, Secretary, if you could, were there plans to set up investment or set up shop in the Philippines after the APEC summit and the ASEAN summit as well? I do remember that President Bongbong Marcos also met, one of his last meetings, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was with Thai businessmen. Would you be able to share with us any commitments made in the past to travels and meetings of the president?
Yeah, I think in every visit the president has made so far, there's always been a segment where and our other officials, as well as private sector, have had meetings with the various business sectors. And I know that there were a number of agreements made at the private sector level, definitely, companies, etc., to work in the for the Philippines. So I think most of these visits, in fact, every visit has always been coupled with business meetings, etc., between our private sectors, and that's where most of the agreements are being made at the private sector level.
Okay, and as a last question, Secretary, what's 2023 looking for you and also for the president in terms of trying to cement follow-up on draft or initial talks? So much, sir, which very important, of course, infrastructure, climate change, obviously energy security, and food security. Again, the question, what can we expect in 2023?
Well, I think we're going to have a lot on our plate, especially as we try to promote our independent foreign policy of being friends through all and enemies to none. And I think with all these agreements or potential agreements that I referred to, I think we will next year try to really ensure that they translate into really concrete activities and projects which would be consistent with our priorities in terms of development and also promoting the economic well-being of the Filipino people.
We'll be waiting for that. Any updates and final decisions on the topics that we've discussed. Secretary Enrique Manalo, sir, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to interview you again sometime soon. Take care, sir.
Thank you, Pinky, and I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.